Okay, welcome everyone on 10.6 GitLab retrospective. Let's start with the previous improvement task from the previous retrospective. It happened that my item was the first one. We actually are working right now on migrating all gitlab.com to object storage. My retrospective task was to ensure that we have the single source of truth in terms of the configuration and the effort. And you can find the link and all attached issues under this infrastructure issue. Marin, you are next.
Thanks, Camille. So I'm stepping in for Mark and Robert, who are not on the call. The item was to establish a process in which even smaller items would be included in feature assurance testing and QA. We tried some things out this release. You can see the issue link there, 116, with mixed results, I would say. Basically, it's really difficult to figure out what's small word testing and what's not. And it's really seriously time-consuming for everyone. If you open that issue, you'll also see how many tasks there are. So I want to say amazing effort from everyone to pitch in and work on it. But it also is bringing to our attention that we need to definitely find a better way, both from the release process side and also from people that are actually doing QA and FA. So from the release process side, we are trying something different for 10.7. You can take a look at the release tools issue there, where we are going to focus on bug and feature issues and try to test those in the next iteration. This will probably also mean that we'll have to do QA for a bit longer than we've been doing because it's like 1-2 day testing is not enough to cover the change, only the changes that we have, not even the features that we already have. Sean has a comment. Sean, maybe speak up.
Yeah, sure. So this might not apply for the initial release candidate, but it's something I found because okay, so I'm a manager, so I never work on features. The only things that I will write code for typically are fixing a bug or a regression, right? And one thing I found helpful lately is a lot of the time, I can just put in a URL on staging and say okay, when this is fixed, this will either show this or will not break or whatever. And then when I go back to it, I'm just okay, that's my URL, try that. Does it work? I don't know if that works for all of the issues we've had, but certainly for some of them where I've merged them, I've not been totally sure how I can QA that. So maybe if it was in the merge request or we just added it to the issue description, that would help other people chip in if someone who knows the most about the change is away. Because for a lot of these, it's quite, the bug fixes, it's quite sort of a straightforward QA step, right? It's this is how you reproduce the bug before, but it doesn't happen anymore.
Ideally, we should be putting things into GitLab QA. So because we do run GitLab QA against every deployment, theoretically, if we also include GitLab QA in our process of development, we would be saving ourselves a lot of time. But yeah, Sean, it's a difficult task. We should definitely try it. We are testing things out and we are making progress as you'll probably see in the next item that I am also taking over from James, who's the release manager. What went well this month? So RC1 didn't land in production. That sounds bad, but it's actually really good because we found a couple of issues while testing on staging, and you can see the link there. Josh.
Thanks, Martin. So I just want to say a quick thing that the monitoring team shipped 2 major features this release: custom metrics and cluster monitoring. So this is probably the highest throughput we've had for a relatively small team. So I just wanted to thank the team for all the hard work. It was a really good release for us. Martin, back to you with another major item for us here.
Yep. We shipped the cloud native charts with an alpha label. So the reason why I'm putting this in here is because it's a huge effort from everyone in engineering. So the distribution team is working on the charts themselves, but we wouldn't be able to do it with the help from Sean's team, Camille's team, and others as well that are actually changing the architecture of GitLab. So it is absolutely amazing that we managed to do this. Camille?
So I would actually thank everyone who helped solving the CI/CD contention problem. We had so many different tasks and so many different top deliverables, but with the joint effort from platform discussion teams, we actually managed to do the majority of what we plan to do, pretty much almost everything. So thank you, Sean, and thank you, Dawe, for helping out. Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Camille. I'm starting to echo Myron and Camille's comments on all the effort going into shipping these major changes, the object storage work. So I really appreciate that, and looking forward to the fruits of our labor here with where GitLab is going, also with our charts for customers. So really exciting stuff. Also want to mention another thing that's pretty exciting. We shipped an alpha or experimental version of ChatOps. This was a kind of a fast moving feature with aggressive timelines, and New York put a ton of time into it and a ton of work into it, and it really turned out really well. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. And Camille, thanks for the review, the feedback, and all the other effort you put in to help provide some guidance on how to best interact with CI as well. So thanks to you both. This is a pretty cool feature, so I appreciate it. Next up is what went wrong this month. Maren, over to you, covering for James.
Thanks, Josh. So we did have a couple of things slip through the deploy, or rather testing on staging and Canary, and it went into production. So RC2 landed in production, and we had a couple of decent-sized problems there that required hot patching GitLab.com. There is some discussion on how to prevent those in future, but check out the link there. James also says that RC1 got delayed. We were supposed to do RC1 way earlier than we actually did. It was still within the time written in our documentation, but we were trying to do RC1 long before that cutoff date. However, due to security release that was happening at the same time, where Robert and James were involved, they just couldn't handle 2 releases at the same time. It's a lot of work there. My item is next. We shipped an updated version of gmalloc, and this is causing issues for some people at the moment, so it's an ongoing thing. We are considering reverting the change. Stan actually pinged someone, or I don't know if it was me, 2 hours ago that we should consider reverting it, and I agree. We did test this, but we are unable to reproduce this problem on any of our environments. So, yeah. Stan, you're up next.
Yeah, for Geo, we upgraded Git from 2.14 to 2.16, and it had huge improvements in terms of performance for what we were seeing for Geo. But because we have a lot of these stale work trees from Squash and Rebase, Git changes behavior and actually looks at all those work trees when it tries to do some work. So in total, about 1,250 projects on GitLab.com were actually affected. It seemed like more, but not as many as I thought. We have something in Gitly now that will, in the housekeeping task, will sweep anything that's older than 6 hours, but it doesn't guarantee that we'll actually get everything. So I think that's the next step. We're going to want something that kind of just walks through all the projects and does a test and sweeps anything that's bad there. But yeah, that caused some pain too for production as well. Camille.
So for a few months already, we work on the object storage, and we work basically steadily, but it could be, I wish we could do it faster, but since we kind of work on the live organism, which is GitLab.com, we also tend to be very careful. And basically, amount of the things that we have to fix along the process to ensure that we leave state of the product in better shape. It's just crazy. Like, I think that it was last Thursday or Friday, we finally pushed migration of 100,000 of traces. It worked pretty much great, but we figured out another issue that we pretty much solved, but it's just increased the round trip. And as Sean is actually writing right now, backporting 9 months of work from EE to CE is uber painful too, because like it kind of creates a contention that we have to be careful what changes we target to EE and what changes we target to CE, and ensure that we don't break too much in the process. Sean, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, not really. I think like it's because these were such features, also because we were still working on the same feature at the same time, is what made it difficult. I don't necessarily have any proposal to fix this that isn't, 100% hindsight. Like 9 months ago, we should have made this in Libre in the first place. Beyond that, like I think we've tried to do the best we can at every step. It's just turned out to be painful because of that contention that you mentioned.
So I think we're gonna basically like slowly resolve these problems, but practically it takes longer than we kind of anticipated because of the amount of the things that we have to improve along the process. Unfortunately, it has impact on cloud native in the end, because we have to divide and conquer on solving the smaller problems and make this full story to be complete slightly later, unfortunately. Marvin, what we can improve?
Thanks, Camille. So one thing that came from went wrong this month was security release process was happening at the same time as the regular process. So what we are trying to do now is define a security release process a bit better. It's work in progress. Some documentation is merged, some is still being written. But the proposal there will be to have a date where you can definitely expect that a non-critical security release will be created, which will give a bit more structure to both the developers and release managers, product, everyone involved, security, of course. And we are working on getting that streamlined and clearer for everyone. What we can also improve, we can use Canary now for our daily work. And I've been using it since we got the scriptlet or the bookmarklet. We do need to improve Canary experience a bit more, because right now you need to change your Git remotes to Canary in order to actually use it properly. And I don't think the whole company will be changing everything over. So we'll need to do some more improvements there. Also, it's not really easy to know at which point you are on a Canary and which point you are not. And I think there is some ongoing work there to improve that situation. Sean.
Thanks, Marion. First of all, those two improvements are awesome, especially the security release document. I think having a regular security release and that documented clearly is great. I just love it. I don't actually know what's happening here. I think Eric's adding some really good questions below, but I was just curious because we were talking about catching regressions earlier before, and I definitely feel like qualitatively that like later RCs are much better than later RCs were before. But looking just at a simple search of like Milestone plus the regression label, there's not a super obvious trend there over the last couple of releases. It seems like we're around about 50 regressions every single time. In terms of improvements, one thing that we can do is if you add the regression label, please add a team label at the same time, because unless I'm looking at a list like this or a list of untriaged issues, I rarely look at a list without the discussion label filter on, because, you know, there's a bunch of teams. Like, I'm just focusing on my area. So if it doesn't have any team label and everybody does that, nobody will see it. One thing I sort of suggested was like, not for new untriaged issues, but just for regression issues for that team, like maybe rotating around the team and having someone check in on them, and just make sure that if there are any new regressions that someone hasn't been pinged on, that they get picked up. So it's like a facilitator designation. It's not like you have to fix all the regressions. It's just that you have to make sure that the regressions get noticed. Marin, you had some thoughts on the distribution team doing general issue triage?
So we've been trying this for, I think now 3 or 4 weeks, where every week one person from the distribution team is dedicated to doing issue triaging. For now, we don't have it as a process. It's more of a try what works best for you. So spend some time per day and write down what you're actually triaging. So things that are confirmed as valid bugs, things like stale issues and so on. And I said, we see it working with mixed results only because I kind of expected to see the number of issues going down. However, in the past 3 weeks, we've seen pretty much a steady number. So I think it's almost like one-on-one the same number. Obviously, new issues are coming in and we are closing issues. So if we didn't do that, probably the number of issues would be way higher. But it's important to know that this is time-consuming. I don't know, we need to do a cost-benefit analysis there a bit better. We will present our results probably in our functional group update when everyone does a rotation, and we get like an average result there.
Cool, thank you. I look forward to that. I try and triage a couple of like milestone issues a day, and you're right, it is time-consuming, and quite often I miss it. So like, you know, I'm not achieving that. So I know the pain. Eric, did you want to talk about some things we could consider thinking about here?
Yeah, no, thanks for raising this. Like I say here, our metrics should agree with our instincts, and if they're diverging, let's look into that. So I don't want to just like, you know, write it off as, oh no, things are definitely better, you know, but this stuff can get complicated. Like, have we changed we're looking at a time series, but have we changed our accounting method over this time series? Were bugs there that we weren't catching before, and now we're catching them, but the overall number of bugs have gone down? There's all kinds of things that could be going on here. But I think there's a good argument to spend a little bit of time here now that we've got 4 months of data to dig into a little bit and strengthen our opinions about what's going on. Are we making things better? Are we spending too much time? Are we no longer efficient with this sort of stuff? So maybe this could be one of the action items, is we could elect the right person to kind of dive in here and see, you know, is the proportion of regressions to MRs changing, or, you know, what may be going on here. But thanks for raising this. Victor, regression hygiene.
Yeah, so this, what Sean brought up here leads to a larger point, but just regressions specifically. I think there was an MR that Fabio put through. I don't know if that was merged in yet. And I think I recall Dawi mentioning this, at least, that if a regression is not fixed, for example, we're fixing 10.6 regressions now, I think. It's not clear to me what the cutoff date is anyways, but essentially we should not be fixing 10.3 and 10.4 regressions. And the links that that Sean still has open 10.3 and 10.4 regressions. And my understanding, at least from I believe Dawi, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that those should just be turned into bugs. So in terms of hygiene, that's a problem, because we have open regressions that are, you know, not ill-defined, because the whole point of regression, to my understanding, is we fix them right away. So that's to me maybe one symptom of just issues getting logged and nobody is taking care of them. And then so another instance of this is, which I think is worse, not regressions, but just issues that have been assigned to individuals, developers or UXers, and if they don't get to them, that's fine. but even after the code freeze, nobody has looked at them, and they're still sitting in that release. And then there's no merge request on it, there's no comments on it. And then so a customer comes in and they can't essentially trust the milestone anymore because there's no confirmation of that. So we're inconsistent. So I don't know if it's in our handbook or whatever, but I would suggest that if you've been assigned an issue, that as an engineer, if you've been assigned an issue, you're responsible to alert somebody that I would say definitely by the code freeze, better if prior to the code freeze, but if by the code freeze, there's no way that the issue could be finished, that something has to be done to it, alert the engineering manager, alert the product manager to say that this issue cannot be done, and then we're changing the milestone on it. So I don't know if that's been chatted about previously. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I agree. I think not everything's going to make it, and that's fine. And sometimes we put things into a milestone and then we take them out. But if something is on the current milestone and it goes out, it needs a comment going with it saying why that happened. And that doesn't, I think we're generally pretty good at that, but that doesn't always happen. And I wonder if your thing you were talking about, making sure that the closed releases don't have any issues in them, if we make sure that the assignee or assignees have ownership of that would help there, mention them in a comment, say please update with the current status of this, should it be in the backlog, should it be on a current release. For the regression hygiene, yeah, you're right. 10.6 originally on my list said 54. And then I was just looking at the list of open ones, and I noticed 3 of them were actually created against 10.0. And then someone had to move them to 10.6, which, they weren't scheduled necessarily, but it also means they're not 10.6 regressions, they're 10.0 regressions that we didn't fix in time, which is a different thing. And that goes back to Eric's point about this is a snapshot. This might not be the best data we could have.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's this is yet another argument for a single priority field and one that doesn't change. I mean, if we have a regression label and we're talking about removing that label, we're actually losing data, and we're hampering our ability to look at these things sort of historically. So what I would prefer is we have we capture a version found in, and that's just persistent, that would never change. We have a priority field that doesn't change unless the priority for some reason changes. And then you can have a fixed version, or we could look at things historically like time to close and be able to analyze things that miss their intended fixed version that is sort of dictated by priority. If something's a P1, it should be fixed immediately, or let's say a P2 fixed in the next release. If it misses that, we should be able to look at those things. And I think we don't quite have the taxonomy to do that effectively today. But Mech's here. I see Mech commenting. He's got lots of good thoughts about this stuff, having done it many times before. So I think we can start to look at this stuff deeper. Okay, so if there aren't any more thoughts on that, it's up to me and Yob to decide what the action items are going to be for this next release. I think defining the security release process is a good one. I've been hearing more and more about that. And so I'd love for that one to continue. Maren, I'd love for you to find someone else besides yourself to drive it if possible. Could you nominate someone so it's not falling on your shoulders?
That's a good question. I'll have to think about it. I don't have anyone at the top of my head.
Think about it. And then I think Sean's point about we have 4 good data points here, 4 months of data. So I think looking in here and just developing an opinion on, has the lines of code gone up in our releases? Have the number of merge requests gone up in our releases? Are we finding more bugs that are there? Developing opinion on why this metric is not coinciding with some of the other pieces of information we have is sort of a good one. Sean, do you feel like you're in a position to sort of do this investigation, or do you think this needs to be done by a release manager or someone else?
No, I think, my plan was to just, because there's 200 odd issues there, was just to look through them, see, figure out how many are valid for each, take those numbers, look at the numbers for the totals for each release as well, and go from there. I don't have a great plan at the moment, apart from start looking at the individual issues and see if I can see a pattern. So,
Okay. All
And
right. Well,
try and clean up the numbers.
We've had pretty good luck taking on 2 major action items. So let's do that. TBD for defining the release process. Merit will nominate someone, and then Sean, if you can look into this regression data and tell us if we're missing something. And I think Victor's point on regression hygiene is a good one. I think we've been having this discussion. I think that the discussion will move forward about priority, about other fields. I think this is something that, as Mac onboards, he'll help advise us and make some recommendations about what the label taxonomy should be. And I think we want to do a small iteration here, but the trick with time series is that we have to do an iteration and leave it be for a period of time. Otherwise, you don't get time series data. So this is one that we want to plan carefully and hopefully change it once and then leave it alone for a while. Otherwise, we continue to invalidate our time series data. So let's not put time pressure on this one. Let's let Mech get comfortable and observe a couple releases and then fix this one the right way.
Eric, if I could take just 30 seconds to answer Mech's question here. With customer expectation, I wanted to highlight that there's 2 points here. One, Eric is talking about we don't have the mechanism, we don't have the data to highlight an issue is going through different stages, a regression or issue or feature request and so forth. What I was trying to highlight is that we're essentially not complying with our own rules, and then that confuses ourselves and customers. And so our own rule right now is that an issue is the single source of truth. So an issue being, you describe the scope of the issue milestone tells you when the issue will be worked on and shipped, the issue label telling you the taxonomy of the issue itself. And so those are not complying at a real-time basis, which we should strive for. And therefore that is causing customer confusion because they can't expect, we can't tell them anymore that the issue is a single source of truth. And the example I was providing is that on code freeze day, after the code freeze day, an issue that is not worked on, that did not make it, should not have that milestone anymore because it's not going to be shipped on that day. But say there's an edge case where you have you're working on an exception for the code freeze, so you're going to leave the milestone on that issue, and therefore you would probably leave a comment on the issue saying that we're probably going to leave it in. We're working on this exception. So that's why my point being that we're not adhering, we're not complying to our own process, and that's a problem. Perhaps the root problem is changing the process or what have you, but I just wanted to highlight that, or answer your question specifically, Mac, that managing customer expectations, we don't give them a list of anything. We just give them the issue. If they ask for a specific status on the issue, we just say, look at the milestone, look at the issue, look at the label, and you'll know.
So that's a good point, Victor. So why don't we say, everyone should take a moment today or this week and look at their own backlog of assigned issues and just make sure that that hygiene is complying with our current rules, regardless of some change coming. And managers do the same thing. Like, let's cross-reference. Managers, look at the backlogs for your team and just try to catch anything that appears to not comply with our current process that's in the handbook.
So if I can only add like one more thing before we leave. So there is a hole I noticed in the process earlier when we started working on the cloud native Helm charts. We are using weekly milestones there. So just shifting milestone did not give us any visibility in how things are progressing. So I pasted a link there in the document where you can see how our milestone currently looks. You can see some of the issues that have milestone in which they were worked on, for example. And that means like every issue has like multiple labels that actually show a progression of an issue. Like it was worked on instead of 1 week, it was worked on like 5 weeks. And then we can actually talk about why this happened and so on. I don't know whether that's doable for a project the size of GitLab CE, but I thought it might be interesting to consider when talking about adding a 10.6 bug or something like that label. Okay, I don't think there's any more comments. So I'll end the call here, I guess. Have a great one.
Great day, everybody.